into through projective identification? Does it come from one member of the group or from the whole group, or from one group and the rest of the members of the group are just acquiescent? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Right.
It's easy enough in individual therapy to know where it's coming from, but in a group, who's
right.
the one that's happening?
Well, certainly, for something to happen in a group, whatever it were, there has to be at least a basic assumption that the group shares to let that occur.
There seems to be like an implicit concept of the group mind that forms. Yeah.
Yes.
That he doesn't really talk about directly, I don't think. I haven't.
Oh, actually he does.
Oh, yeah?
He does. Yes, exactly.
But the two questions that come, actually, that you wanted to say.
But wait a minute, let me say something.
Yeah.
The group mind means the group mind in each individual, that when a group gets effectively together, is observable as if it were the mind of the collective group. That is what last time we defined as group mentality.
Oh, yeah.
Remember? But it can only happen, according to Bion, because we all have a group mind. So that it combines with other members of the group when we get together. It's already there. That means that we are we're all social animals, whether we like it or not. It's not up to us. I mean, this is hardwired.
Yeah. That's the way he was different than Freud, right? Bion says that
yes.
he didn't think that the group mind developed because of the group, but that one came with that a priori, and then it got expressed in the group, which is the same thing like the internal objects being expressed in the transference.
Yes.
I guess. Yeah.
Right.
So, collective unconscious, I think of Jung, and it's a totally different thing, though, right? Because the way I understand it, and I'm not even sure that I understand it properly, but that it's the collective unconscious is images. I mean, like when you see someone paint something that someone else has painted too, like
Archetype.
Yeah. Is that in the
I think it's different. I don't know that much about Jung, but I think it's different. It's not.
Yeah,
I mean, you could define it as collective and conscious, just because it's collective and it's not conscious. But I think Jung is coming from another side,
okay.
Right? Bion would call that group mentality.
Okay.
Right? That is, there are different members of the group that individually would probably go different ways and do different things, or in different groups would function differently than in a current group. But in a current group, when they combine like in chemistry different elements that combine in a particular way because they have the valencies to combine, and the result is then a chemical compound. If each one of the elements of the chemical compound, right, let's say chloride and natrium, where instead of meeting each other, were meeting other elements, they would give place to other compounds, not the same compound, but still a compound, you see?
That when different people are absent, the group feels different.
Yes, sure.
In a group situation, Robert, is there anything that is projected in projective identification towards the group analyst other than basic assumptions? In a group process, can any fantasy be conveyed to the analyst other than the group's basic assumptions?
Well, if we think that projective identification by definition is unconscious, the response would be no. It's always the basic assumptions. Right? under which the analyst is being, or into which the analyst is being invited or manipulated into.
Okay, those are the basic dimensions that that.
But aren't the basic assumptions really just templates? They're not content. I mean,
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right.
so, I mean, it doesn't constrain the content. It's
No,
just
no.
the configuration
Oh, yeah.
of the
Exactly. Very good.
That's a good clarification.
Very good.
Right.
For instance, let us take the basic assumption of pairing, right? In the basic assumption of pairing, for instance, the group decides, and without thinking, unconsciously, right, without discussing it, that the analyst is just talking nonsense or is not helping at all, right? So they just decide to not listen to them any longer and to let a couple of members of the group discuss what they should do instead of doing group therapy and listen to the analyst. So what is being projected into the analyst is the sense of uselessness. The analyst is being invited out, right? Who wants to listen to you in the first place? You haven't been doing a thing. You've just been there looking at us and not telling us what we needed to do. So we need to think of some alternate strategy. And since you're not saying anything, we'll take over. Well, that would be a projection,
But
wouldn't it?
that's not necessarily unconscious. It might be very conscious.
Well, what is unconscious, or rather, how that happens, is that it happens all alone. You see, it's a basic assumption that the analyst is now no good, and that if a couple of members of the group search for alternative strategies, the new strategy will be born, the messiahs. They will find the right thing. The basic assumption is that they will find the right thing, right?
Well, maybe, but maybe not. I mean, why is a challenge to the authority or expertise of the group leader necessarily equated with, I don't know, equated with finding an alternative? I mean, there may be many stages of uncertainty, of loss, of breakdown. The group might fall apart.
Yes.
You could have a storming stage, for example. You could have a challenge to the leadership. You could have a disintegration of the group.
Yes.
All those things, and I'm sure many others. That's the one point. And the second point is, I don't know why that's a projection. What are the qualities of those eventualities that make them a projection?
Well, we are saying that only when this is part of a basic assumption, but I think, again, what you're having in mind is that there is always the alternative that the group is functioning as a work group, right? I mean, let's say that suddenly a fire breaks out here, right? We are sitting in the room. I'm at a loss or overwhelmed with anxiety because it's my house and I don't know where to go. And some of you who have a better mind than myself or are not so taken up by anxiety discuss what is best to do and skip me because you notice that I really don't know where to go. Well, that's a work group. That's not a basic assumption then.
I think that
You see what I mean?
For me, they're
So-
not so distinct.
Well, the converse seems like in a work group wouldn't be completely void of defenses like projection and introjection, projective identification. So to me, they didn't. I mean, at least that's how I would
Yes,
understand
yes.
a work group. People still bring their defenses and basic assumptions.
They're not mutually
Well, maybe-
exclusive, is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Right on, right on. That is why we are all the time saying, you see, that even when the work group functions as a work group, the basic assumptions are always hovering
And they're
right?
in the proto-mental system when they're hovering. They're not active in the group
But they may become active at any
at
given
any
time,
moment. But
right?
when they're not, they're in the proto-mental
They're in the
system,
proto-mental-
waiting to emerge should
Exactly.
the opportunity arise.
Exactly. But I think what you two are finding, rightly so, is that there is not a clear-cut distinction, either or. That is, that if we are a work group, then there is no basic assumption. Oh, there can be both. There can be a predominance of functioning as a work group, but certainly there will be phenomena that are escaping our attention. We cannot cover it all and understand everything and be aware of everything. Well, we do function under the basic assumptions, and then to make the picture more complex, there are the specialized basic assumptions, right? When you go into the church or you go into the army, right, these are specialized basic assumptions, meaning it's not totally unthought, it's not totally unconscious, you are conscious. If you are religious, you go to church on Sundays, it's very conscious for you that you have decided that God is your leader, or that the priest is, in God's name, leading the, what do you call it, the congregation, right? And you decide to go there. It's not that all of a sudden, alas, you didn't realize that this is what's happening. You decide, that's a specialized basic assumption group, right? But in any case, I think we covered what I wanted to cover, that is basically to later understand more about projective identification in individual settings, right? That these were Bion's findings when Bion finished all his experiences in groups as an army psychiatrist and then at the Tavistock, and when he then went into analysis with Melanie Klein and started studying Klein's theories, right, particularly her theory about projective identification and projections and so on, he went back to rewrite, which is the last chapter in the book, that is his chapter on group dynamics, which could also be called, though he didn't call it that way, is Experiences in Groups Revisited from the point of view of psychoanalysis. And surprise, surprise, he found that seen from a psychoanalytic perspective, all his experiences and his hypotheses would still hold and had already been discovered in the group of two in psychoanalysis, only with slightly different names.
Can we pause for a sec?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, this is the first time I've done this.
I thought all this would take us 5 minutes.
Robert, can I ask a question? Can I talk?
Yes, sure. Well, try.
I mean, I don't know. When I was studying family therapy and couples therapy, one of the things we talked about was the difference between the individual transference of one member of the family and the collective transference of the family transference or the couple transference. So somebody had asked a question about whether it was always a group expression of the basic assumption, and I was wondering if there was a way